Our story kicks off at a bustling land center, where everyone was talking about how the player known as Kang-chi had once again snagged the top spot on the game's brand new map. The map had just dropped, but he was already dominating the leaderboards in a game called Dungeoncraft, where players get to build their very own dungeons. And yet, Kang-chi was always number one. Another player couldn't help but wonder out loud how he pulled it off every single time, while someone else muttered that he had to be using bots to play for him. Hearing this, Kang-chi himself just stayed quiet. His buddy overheard the comment and asked why he bothered playing at the land center when he could easily afford a setup at home. Kang-chi just shrugged, saying he really liked the food there, and what can you do? Without missing a beat, he announced he clinched first place again and told the others to get ready for him. This made another player scoff that he talked like it was no big deal, saying he really did sound like a bot. And to himself, Kang-chi thought, well, they're not entirely wrong. The only real fun he had in life was playing this game and conquering every map. Later on, as he was saying goodbye to his friend, he thought about why he was so obsessed with the game, and the answer was pretty simple. In the real world, he had zero control over anything. But in the game, anything was possible. He could even do simple things like move misplaced power poles, something you could never do in real life, but in the game, they were gone with just a click of the mouse. Right as he was lost in that thought, a truck came barreling down the street and nearly flattened him. He couldn't help but think how cruel reality was. You can't just delete a truck when you want to. Luckily, the driver slammed on the brakes just in time, and he was safe. The driver leaned out the window, yelling and asking if he was crazy, but Kang-chi just calmly pointed up at the crosswalk signal, which was clearly green for him. The driver just looked confused, totally baffled about when the light changed. It just made Kang-chi even more frustrated with a world where he couldn't fix things like he could in the game. If he could just rewrite the code of reality, he'd create a world that was perfect. And right at that moment, an iron beam snapped loose from a nearby construction site and came plummeting down towards a little girl playing without a care in the world. Even as he thought it was a pretty dangerous and frankly dumb place to be playing, Kang-chi felt a surge of purpose. Maybe, just this once, he could control something. He took off, running to save the kid, thinking that, if nothing else, he realized that this was just how life was. Even trying to be a good guy came with a hefty price. Suddenly, everything went black, and he found himself in a strange, otherworldly space, almost like he was floating outside his own body. It felt like he'd been sucked into a black hole, but strangely enough, he didn't seem to be, dead. A mysterious voice called out to him, and then this huge, celestial being with 3 eyes appeared out of nowhere. She told him it was time to face the music. Kang-chi was totally clueless about this place she called Oblivion. The celestial being explained that death was just a gateway to reincarnation, and that he was getting a second shot at life to get his memories back. None of this was making any sense to Kang-chi, so he asked her to break it down for him. But instead, the being just commanded him to open his eyes. And just like that, a strange energy zapped his mind, and he abruptly woke up in a completely different body. He found himself in a lonely room inside what looked like a castle, feeling totally helpless. He stumbled over to a mirror and saw the reflection of a demon staring back at him. That demon was him. He was in total shock. He was sure he had died, but here he was, in a new body with a whole new look. He had no idea if this was the afterlife, some kind of video game, or a crazy anime prank. Everything felt way too real to be just a dream. Okay. First things first, he needed to figure out where he was. Looking around, he quickly realized he was in an ancient castle with classic medieval architecture. Suddenly, a new voice snapped him out of it, asking how long he was planning to stand there, muttering to himself. The next thing he knew, a blade was shoved straight through his chest. He could barely even react, just coughing up blood as he watched the crazy woman who'd stabbed him laugh like it was all a big joke. She stared down at him with pure contempt, clearly savoring the pain she was causing, and all Kang-chi could think was, wow, that really hurts, as she'd run him through with such brutal force. He just wanted to know why she did it, and the girl casually explained that, well, she just really disliked him and figured this was the best way to get him out of the picture. Simple as that, really. She was just about to finish the job when, out of nowhere, a surprise guest showed up and neatly disarmed her with a single, expert move. It was a long-haired guy holding a whip, and the woman, totally caught off guard, asked Tarm why he was crashing her party. Tarm just looked at her and pointed out that she probably shouldn't do that, seeing as Kang-chi was, her brother. Kang-chi was just getting more confused by the second, wondering who this new guy was. Tarm strolled over to him, cool as a cucumber, called him Kella, and said it looked like Caldera was giving him a hard time again. He then offered him a little something to drink, which looked a lot like a healing potion. Kella, thinking it was just a regular potion, took a swig, but the second that stuff hit his throat, he immediately spit it all out, feeling a fiery sensation from head to toe. It was way too spicy to be a normal potion that was straight up poison. Caldera just watched with a deadpan expression and asked if he was going to kick the bucket, making it pretty obvious that was her whole plan from the start. Tarm took a look at the situation and noted that Kella certainly seemed to be in a lot of pain, but unfortunately, it didn't look like he was actually going to check out. So, he declared the recipe an official failure. Kella, through all the agony, could only wonder what he did to deserve this and why his life had to be so incredibly difficult. Right on cue, the huge castle doors swung open. The Demon King, Hellcin himself, was back from a little trip hunting heroes. The moment they sensed him, Caldera and Tarm piped up, asking if their dad was home. Hearing this, Kella's brain short-circuited. What did they mean, father? He was floored by the sudden realization that the Demon King was supposed to be his dad. The king strode in and demanded to know why his house sounded like a rowdy frat party. Kella stared at him, still struggling to process that this guy was the actual Demon King. Caldera immediately tried to shift the blame, pointing her finger and saying it was all Kella's fault. But the king was not interested in hearing any excuses. He grabbed both kids by the scruff of their necks, calling their little squabble a complete embarrassment. As cries and whimpers of pain filled the Demon King's castle, the two siblings got on their knees and begged their father for forgiveness. Kella, watching this whole chaotic scene unfold, started to wonder if these two lunatics really were his siblings, which would mean that he was the son of that absolute monster. The king then announced that inside his castle, he only wanted to hear two very specific sounds: the birth of a mighty demon, or the honorable demise of an enemy. Then, in a fit of rage, he casually brought his foot down on Kella's head. With all three of them left on the verge of shuffling off this mortal coil, Kella finally accepted that he'd really been reborn in another world. And to top it all off, he was the son of the Demon King. It felt like he'd hit the absolute worst-case scenario jackpot. He couldn't help but think, of all the people in the world, why did it have to be him? Just then, he remembered a special moment with his mother. He was crying his eyes out because Sella had decided to introduce a fork to his eyeball. His mother, rather than offering any comfort, just remarked that it must have stung quite a bit. Kella then told her that Tom had tried to poison his dinner. His mother just replied that, in that case, he should return the favor, because that's what a proper demon would do. Kella shot back that if he tried something like that, he'd be the one to end up dead. His mother's advice? Just make sure to get them before they get you. She proudly pointed out that his own father took out his brothers when he was only 12 years old to become the Demon King. Her message was crystal clear. If someone tries to take you out, you need to take them out first. She then pulled out a dagger and, for good measure, plunged it right into her son's stomach. She told him this was how a demon handled business, and then asked if he understood, all while he was crying from the pain of being shivved by his own mom. And then, Kella woke up in his bed, gasping for air. His personal attendant, Ren, asked if he was feeling okay. Kella realized that the body he was now in held all of Hellcin's traumatic memories. And yet, despite all that awful stuff, his body had already patched itself up completely. Looked like he came with some pretty high-end regeneration powers. Ren mentioned that he'd been out for a while and that it was almost time for the family dinner. Kella looked over at her, remembering how as a kid, Ren was always so quiet and reserved compared to his other siblings. He was always the one getting looked down on. Even Ren, his own attendant, would pick out his party clothes but would never actually help him get dressed. Kella even brought up that he heard his brother's maid helped him get dressed, to which Ren just said that in that case, maybe he could dress her instead. Kella got the hint that this was pure sarcasm and decided, you know what, fine, he'd just dress himself. Another time, Ren conveniently passed one of her chores onto him, telling him to go clean the deck. One day, she'd be sleeping in his bed, and the next, she'd stick a doll in her place to skip work. Kella couldn't help but wonder how the original owner of this body ever let a simple servant walk all over him. Well, he was in charge now, and there was no way he was putting up with that kind of disrespect anymore. He'd been pushed around, despised, and treated like yesterday's garbage for his entire life. He soon realized this new world wasn't much different from his last one. In the end, it's always the weak who get taken out first. At the family dinner, he was late, and his father called him out in a cold, commanding voice. Kella could feel the intense pressure of his presence. I mean, the guy was the Demon King. It's no wonder everyone was terrified of him. He quickly made his excuses and sat down in his chair. Caldera's response was to casually plunge a knife straight into his leg. The pain was sharp and very real, and even Caldera's maid laughed it off like it was some big joke. Caldera then commented that he wasn't looking too lively and that he should probably eat up. All Kella could think was that he couldn't let anyone find out he'd taken over this body. For now, he just had to bear with it. The moment he started to eat, he realized the food was poisoned again. Caldera, with a faint little smile, mentioned she'd made a special soup just for him and asked if it was any good. Kella said it was, but inside, he was absolutely seething. He thought to himself that these crazy demons weren't his family. They were his enemies. This couldn't go on for much longer. He had to do something. He had always wanted to accomplish something, to do something great with his life. He was the best map designer in the game Dungeoncraft, yet in the real world, he was always getting pushed around and never had the courage to fight back. He refused to die a pointless death like he did before. The anger inside him just boiled over, and without a second thought, he grabbed the poisoned soup and threw it right in Caldera's face, telling her she should give it a try, too. Then, he decided to return the little gift she had given him earlier. He yanked the knife out of his leg and chucked it right into Tarm's shoulder. He then faced the Demon King and asked if it wasn't about time they put a stop to these lovely family dinners. In a complete rage, he flipped the table and announced that from this day forward, everyone would eat alone. The whole room was just shocked by his audacity. Kella angrily thought to himself that now he'd get to see how this bunch of psychos would react. A little later, he was feeling pretty good. He had done what he wanted, but of course, after a stunt like that, he was stomped to death by his own father. However, he recovered in a surprisingly short amount of time and felt a strange, powerful force building up inside of him. At that moment, he knew he really was the son of the Demon King, and what he wanted to find out more than anything was just how strong this new power could become. Ren warned him that it was almost time for his demon power lesson and he needed to hurry to the hall, but Kella just told her to be quiet, snapping that he already knew. Ren was stunned, wondering when he had become so harsh and decisive. Kella thought that this demon power lesson, according to the original body's memories, was one of the absolute worst experiences he had ever gone through. But even so, that wasn't a good enough reason to skip it. Over in the training hall, the instructor announced that Lady Seldra and Lord Tarm would be sitting out of class that day, so only the other royal children would be tested. Kella glanced at the others, recognizing their faces from the old Kella's memories. He remembered how terrified he used to be when they intimidated him, and he knew these demons took advantage of every single weakness to beat him up, humiliate him, and then have a good laugh about it later. Seldra used to just watch while he was being tortured, complaining that they were going too easy on him. And since she held all the authority there, the others followed her orders and beat him even harder. Kella recalled always thinking that he didn't want to fight, and he could feel that the original body had a heart that was just too soft. It was weakness. But now, everything was different. Kang-chi was in the driver's seat, and he decided he was going to use his strength the right way. The instructor asked what the final duel was in the last class, and one of the bullies stepped forward, saying it was between him and Kella, or rather, Sir Kella, he added with a sneer. Kella immediately started to get ticked off. The instructor agreed to set up another duel between them. The bully smirked and asked if Kella was ready for round 2, while the other students were already whispering that he was about to be beaten half to death again. Some even snickered, saying not to make the young master cry in front of everyone. Kella couldn't decide what was more irritating, the jeers from the crowd or the moron standing right in front of him. Kang-chi realized that he and the original Kella were actually a lot alike. In his past life, he was broke and powerless too, constantly looked down on and humiliated. But that was all in the past. As he focused his energy, a terrifying pressure washed over everyone nearby. They all wondered when he'd gotten so much mana, while the bully in front of him was frozen stiff, completely paralyzed by fear. Kella calmly said he'd go easy on him, just one punch. But when that punch landed, he didn't just hit him. He slammed the demon's face into the dirt with so much force, it was like tossing out a bag of trash. The entire crowd was stunned into silence. Rude, the bully, was completely speechless, and the instructor just couldn't believe what he had just seen. Poor Rude was a total mess, with missing teeth, a swelling black eye, and was mumbling incoherently. Kella then coldly asked what he'd said earlier, questioning how he dared talk to the Demon King's son that way. Rude, looking completely defeated, immediately apologized to Sir Kella. Kella warned him that he'd better not slip up in front of him ever again, because next time, he wouldn't be leaving in one piece. Everyone was completely freaked out, wondering what on earth had happened to him, because this was definitely not the same Kella they knew. He then turned to the instructor, who practically jumped just hearing his name, and asked if class was going to continue as usual. The instructor stuttered, "Why, yes, of course." Meanwhile, Ren watched silently from the side, thinking Kella was acting really weird. The Demon King was also watching the class, observing every single detail. Later, back at the Demon Castle, Caldera was soaking in a recovery tub, her body covered in injuries, fuming about how that jerk had the nerve to throw a poison potion right in her face. Tarm, who was with her, urged her to calm down and just focus on healing, reminding her that she couldn't regenerate as fast as Kella. Caldera agreed that was strange, commenting that it made no sense for Kella to be the only one with such an advanced healing ability. Tarm then added that it seemed like Kella had gone through some kind of major transformation because he was like a completely different person now. It was at that moment Tarm realized something else. Even their father seemed happy about what Kella had done. He mentioned it was the first time he'd ever seen his father genuinely smile. Caldera scoffed, saying she highly doubted that smile was because of Kella, but Tarm insisted it wasn't normal and something strange was definitely going on. When Caldera asked what he was getting at, he replied that while she'd probably rather die than team up with Kella, maybe they could at least call a truce for a little while to keep an eye on him together. To his surprise, Caldera agreed it wasn't a terrible idea, but she made one thing crystal clear. If Kella made a single wrong move, she'd take him out herself before he could get any more of their father's attention. Meanwhile, Kella was in a class where the instructor was displaying a magical hologram of the last Demon King, Hellcin, who had the face of a complete and utter psycho, which made Kella think, wow, that guy really looks the part. The instructor explained that Hell had been the most powerful demon of his time, but he was ultimately taken down by a cowardly plot, betrayed by the Celestial Guild and a bunch of other opportunistic guilds who took the chance to seize a piece of the Demon Kingdom. This information clicked for Kella, as it lined up with the new memories he had of those very guilds surrounding the kingdom. The instructor also mentioned that because of those darn guilds, the current Demon King could hardly even leave the castle, making him essentially a prisoner in his own home. He also said that the Celestial Guild, the biggest one around since its founding, was gearing up for an attack on the Demon Kingdom. So, the students had to train their tails off in combat class if they wanted to help the king get rid of these clowns. Inspired, all the students recited an oath together, vowing to fight for the honor of all demons. Sometime after that, Kella was standing alone, looking out at the horizon and trying to figure out his next move. He felt that staying put was a death sentence. So, he went and asked Ren if her father was really going to be away for 3 days. She confirmed that he was. Kella then asked her if she knew of any weaknesses in the castle, like an old architectural map they could use to gain an edge in a fight. He pointed out that their enemies were taking advantage of the neglected territories nearby to launch attacks on the castle, but he planned to use the upcoming expedition to map out the whole area and then hand it all over to his dad to wipe out every single one of them. Kella figured this would be his new role. He also mentioned he was going to create a dungeon separate from normal reality, so he could draw the map however he wanted. With that, he ordered Ren to immediately build him a secret office down in the castle's basement. When she asked what exactly the office was for, Kella told her he needed a private place to work, somewhere his father wouldn't find out about. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's personal recovery tub, he was quietly thinking that he couldn't take his eyes off Kella anymore. Before it was too late, he had to confirm something with his son in person. Later, Kella showed up in the basement and, looking at the mess, asked if this was the office he requested. Ren explained that since it had to be secret, this was the best she could do. Kella commented that she could be a little more careful next time, and Ren thought to herself that he'd been treating her more firmly lately, which, surprisingly, seemed to be working. She also thought Kella had been a little scary recently because he wasn't the same boy he used to be. Even so, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him now that he was starting to act like a real man. Then, Kella looked at Ren and asked why she was still just standing there, ordering her to get him some coffee immediately. Ren scurried off to follow his command, repeating, "Coffee, coffee," as she tried to figure out what on earth that was, having never heard of it. As she disappeared into the castle, completely confused, Kella thought that he was finally alone and could now analyze the map in peace. He realized the Demon King's castle was built in the absolute worst spot for defense, so he decided to create a whole new map himself based on his past memories and experiences. Meanwhile, Ren was still dashing through the corridors, with no clue what she was looking for when she ran right into the Demon King himself. He asked what she was doing in the basement without Kella and demanded to know where his son was and what he was doing. Ren got super nervous, remembering Kella's order to keep it a secret, but the king insisted that she answer him. While she was hesitating, Kella was having a blast creating his new map, which reminded him of the Dungeoncraft game he had loved so much in his previous life. For him, map making was the best way to focus and have fun. It was something he'd always been really passionate about. Suddenly, the door was kicked wide open, and the Demon King stormed in, furious to find out his son had made a secret office right under his nose. Kella barely had a moment to react before his father's fist went straight through his stomach with brutal force. The king said that if Kella truly wanted to help, he shouldn't hide things, but Kella could barely respond, just spitting up blood as he fought to stay conscious. He thought that the pain he was feeling now was way more intense than anything his brothers had ever dished out, and he honestly believed he might actually die this time. But then, still bleeding, Kella held the map out to his father and explained that he was mapping out the entire region surrounding the castle, marking all the weak points and the spots most vulnerable to enemy guild attacks. He said he was drawing the area's geography in detail to help them in future battles. The Demon King looked down at the map and slowly pulled his fist out of Kella's body, letting him finally breathe a little. He then asked why Kella had done all of this in secret. Kella explained that if he had revealed the plan before finishing it, he was afraid his father wouldn't have allowed it. So, he decided to present the map only after it was complete. because as the son of the Demon King, he wanted to help completely destroy the Celestial Guild. The two of them stared at each other intensely for a few seconds, while Ren, who was watching the whole thing, could hardly believe Kella was talking to his own father that way. The Demon King then asked how long it would take him to finish the plan, leaving Kella surprised by the direct question. Despite his injury, Kella replied that 5 would be enough. The king asked if he meant 5 days, and Kella, still panting, clarified that he didn't mean 5 days, but just 5 hours, a statement that completely puzzled the Demon King. Kella insisted that in that time, they could complete all the construction needed for both defense and a counterattack. He even volunteered to personally lead the entire operation. The Demon King stared at his son, totally amazed, finding it hard to believe this determined young man was really his heir. He agreed, saying the plan sounded great, but warned that if Kella was just feeding him empty words to impress him, he would tear the map to shreds and then his son would be next. Kella replied that he understood perfectly, thinking to himself that he'd finally managed to prove his worth, even as he was coughing up blood and seriously wondering if his dad was actually trying to send him to an early grave. Ren, on the other hand, was just thinking about how Kella had successfully won over the Demon King, which made her even more captivated by him. Then she snapped back to reality, remembering she had to rush him to the infirmary. Later on, after recovering a bit, Kella managed to finish the map in just 5 hours, exactly as he'd promised. The forces of the demonic castle immediately sprang into action, with mages conjuring magical illusion barriers around the construction areas so the enemy guilds wouldn't suspect a thing. They also started to alter the very geography of the surrounding land, using magic to reshape everything according to Kella's new blueprint. He thought to himself that with his new map, designed just like it was in a game, his master plan was finally falling into place. Meanwhile, over at the Celestial Guild's camp, the guild master, Merson, was completely floored when he received an urgent message. He demanded to know if the demons were truly reshaping the terrain around the castle, and one of his subordinates confirmed it. The subordinate reported that the enemy had discovered and activated some kind of illusion spell. Emerson grew concerned, as he had no idea what those demons were capable of with that type of magic. The messenger then asked if they should attack immediately to disrupt the plan, but Emerson shot the idea down, believing these enemy tactics would ultimately be useless. He explained that in only 3 days, the guild's most powerful squadron would be fully assembled and ready to mobilize, as Talon's squadron was already on its way. Talon had started putting this elite squad together about 12 years ago, and now, the roster was finally complete. Emerson declared with absolute confidence that this squad was unbeatable and guaranteed that this time, the Demon King was going down for good. According to his math, Talon would arrive at the castle in 2 days, and the knights with him were dead set on taking out the Demon King and ending his bloodline's reign for good. They were ready to burn the castle to the ground and wipe out everyone inside. Among the squadron members, a red-haired woman watched General Killman arrive and commented on his showy entrance. Her name was Commander Shreels, and when a knight asked if they could actually win this time, she replied with unwavering conviction that they could. Shreels declared that Talon's squadron was on a completely different level from the other guilds and that they were 100% certain they would finish the Demon King this time, no doubt about it. At that very moment, the Demon King himself was sitting on his throne, mulling over the map his son had created. He concluded that Kella wasn't bluffing after all, because the plan was actually solid. Although the map wasn't flawless, he was surprised by the sheer effort his son had put into it, and he recognized that Kella had pushed his body to its absolute limit to get it done on time. The king knew he couldn't act rashly, so he decided to bide his time and wait for the perfect opportunity. The next day would be the final day before the guild's big offensive, and he knew he had to bring the war against the Celestials to an end. At that moment, the demon mages and construction crews were working around the clock, reshaping the land and finalizing all the preparations. Kella watched the progress, pleased that everything was going exactly as he had envisioned. To him, this was far more thrilling than just designing game maps, because now he was able to actually mold the real world to his liking. His only job now was to wait for the battle to finally kick off. And then, at long last, the big day arrived. On the field of the Celestial Guild, Talon was fully assembled with his entire squad and stood before Hermerson, declaring that the time had come to take down the Demon King. Hermerson immediately gave the order to advance, fully believing they were poised for a total victory. Talon was fired up and ready for a fight, but suddenly, something came crashing down from the sky right in front of his group. At first, it just looked like a tiny, twinkling speck of magic light that popped into existence. The commander quickly figured out it was a trap, but, welp, a little too late for that. Then, bam, a massive explosion went off right in their faces, catching everyone in the blast. But despite the crazy intense attack, both sides were super quick on their feet and managed to react just in time. So, believe it or not, nobody got hurt. But what seemed like a simple boom was actually the Demon King himself making a grand entrance, right in front of the whole crowd. So, rewind a few hours. The king was getting the rundown from his son, Kella, who explained that he'd managed to switch off an ancient magical barrier that was basically a magic blocker for the entire demon territory. And now, with that barrier down, the Demon King could zip around with his teleportation powers whenever he wanted, completely off the enemy's radar. When the king asked if he could just pop right into the enemy camp, Caldera was like, "Are you crazy? That's basically jumping into the lion's den all by yourself." Tarm also chimed in, saying it was way too risky, even for a powerhouse like him. Then, of course, someone else in the room, Hell, piped up and asked if they were seriously doubting the Demon King's strength, and you bet they both backpedaled immediately, saying, no, that's not it. Their main worry was just that he wasn't fully healed up from his last battle. But even with all that, the king just told everyone to zip it, saying his mind was made up. And that brings us back to the present moment, where the Demon King was standing right in front of the Heavenly Guild squad with one simple goal, to wipe them all out. He'd gathered a ridiculous amount of mana around him, so much that the pressure in the air was just crushing. It was so intense that even the toughest warriors started to sweat and back away. But even so, Talcan didn't even flinch. He was totally set on taking the Demon King down, and his buddies, filled with newfound courage, charged forward with him. But man, the king's power was on a whole other level. The second the fight started, the whole battlefield just erupted into pure chaos and destruction. Meanwhile, Kella was way up on top of the demon castle tower, keeping a close eye on everything and getting the rest of the forces ready. He announced that all their preps were done and gave the order for the army to charge the enemy guild. Right away, all the troops took off, heading straight for the center of the action where the Demon King was already throwing down with the enemy. As part of their master ambush plan, monstrous creatures started bursting out from underground, attacking the Heavenly Guild warriors from every single direction. This totally made Kella think everything was going exactly as planned, and hey, that was awesome. But then, sneaking up behind him were Caldera and Tarm. Caldera, in a super chilly tone, said she still couldn't figure out how Kella pulled all this off, but then added that things weren't quite going the way he thought they were. Tarm, standing right beside him, added that unfortunately, Kella had gotten a little too big for his britches, and it was time for him to go. Kella clearly did not see this betrayal coming, and before he could even blink, Tarm slammed his weapon right into his gut, telling Caldera that now was the perfect time to finish the job. Without a moment's hesitation, Caldera dashed in and, with one clean swing, sent Kella's head flying. The two of them actually laughed as they watched his body drop. They commented that without a head, even Kella's famous regeneration powers wouldn't do him any good. As his head got tossed to the ground, Kella's last thought was something like, "Well, I guess this is really the end of the line for me." His body hit the floor hard, and his head rolled right to the edge of the tower. Caldera then walked over and remarked that they'd finally gotten rid of that troublesome guy. Tarm said it was time for them to go help their dad on the front lines. But then, plot twist, Caldera went and betrayed her own brother, stabbing him in the back with a hidden dagger. Tarm, even though he was hurt, didn't go down right away and realized Caldera was using one of their mother's forbidden weapons, something neither of them was ever supposed to touch. Caldera just shot back that she's a demon and doesn't do rules, because hey, weapons are meant to be used. Tarm asked if she was really this serious about it, and Caldera said that if she took him out right then and there, she'd become the one and only successor to the throne. Absolutely furious, Tarm charged at her, and Caldera swore she'd make it quick for him. And just like that, the two of them started a crazy, violent fight right there on top of the tower. Meanwhile, Kella was somehow still conscious, just in total disbelief, wondering how his own kind could be so ruthless, betraying and turning on each other without a second thought. He'd never in a million years imagined his story would end this way. But just then, the ground under him cracked open and up popped Ren from a secret tunnel, shaking but totally determined. She scooped up Kella's head and started sticking it back onto his body, trying her best not to freak out. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, demon portals were opening up everywhere, and their perfectly timed attacks made it super obvious the demons already knew the humans' playbook. The Celestial Guild was getting absolutely wrecked and had no idea how to handle this flood of monsters and enemy magic. That's when the talking dragon came barreling out with a huge roar, blasting everything in its way with pure fire and rage, and zoomed right at the Demon King for a massive strike. But the king didn't even flinch. He just shot up into the air to meet the dragon, grabbed its neck, and just popped its head clean off in one smooth move, before tossing the dragon's body to the ground like it was a piece of trash. The commander of the Talcan squad saw this insane scene and, totally horrified, screamed for everyone to open fire on the Demon King right away. But while they were scrambling to get an attack together, the demon army just kept on marching. And right there, in the middle of them was Hell, just chilling out calmly, watching the whole spectacle with his arms crossed. The commander asked if they'd landed a hit on Hell, But it didn't take long to see that something was way off. Hell's body started to change right before their very eyes, shifting into a super intimidating and scary new shape. Yep, he was powering up into his strongest form. The members of the Celestial Guild were pretty much frozen stiff with fear, and the commander muttered that this was just like the old books said it would be. Shriels confirmed it, adding that this was, in fact, the Demon King's final form. Even with Shriels yelling at them to keep it together and not get scared, it was plain to see that the warriors were totally rattled. The Demon King's insane aura was pressing down on everyone, and even Commander Talcon could hardly budge, whether from fear or just the crushing weight of all that wicked energy. The Demon King looked around and thought to himself that Kella's plan really only had one tiny flaw. He gathered all their forces smack dab in the middle of the enemy's home base, which meant there was no easy way out. Still, it's not like that was going to make him chicken out, because hey, he's the Demon King, and being cornered wasn't something he worried about. Turns out, Kella had already planned for this. Not that Hell cared about that little detail right now, though. What really mattered at this moment was taking out all the humans. So, Hell started to pull in even more mana around himself, creating an energy so thick you could practically feel it from miles away. The seriously injured commander of the Talcon squad yelled that he was about to unleash his final form and that everyone needed to be ready to sacrifice themselves, since it was their only shot to stop the Demon King from completely wiping out the guild. When Hell finally went full power with his final form, the energy blasting from him was so massive you could see it from over the horizon, way past the Demon Castle walls. Meanwhile, back in the underground tunnels, Ren was still frantically trying to stick Kella's head back on his body. She was shaking and had tears in her eyes, and she just kept whispering that it had to work, practically begging. It reminded her of that one time Kella's arm got torn off. And even though she was grossed out and terrified, she did exactly what he said and just put it back on. And what do you know? To her total surprise, his arm healed up perfectly a little while later. Now, the challenge was way bigger, since she had to see if the same trick would work on his head. Ren hesitated for a second, thinking that this was probably a lot more dangerous, but she went ahead with it carefully, still totally scared. After a few tense moments, the experiment worked, and his body started to show signs of life. With that, Kella wasted no time putting his plan in motion. He told Ren to go find Caldera's servant and give her a very specific message he prepared. A little later, Ren found Caldera's servant and, just like Kella told her to, said that Kella was planning to take out Caldera during the battle, using the moment the Demon King was distracted with the guild's warriors. Caldera's servant was shocked and asked how he was possibly going to pull that off, and Ren explained that this would be the perfect opportunity for Caldera to be the one to chop off Kella's head, because that would be a surefire way to finish him, since his healing powers don't work if his head gets disconnected from his body. As Ren looked at Kella's motionless body with his head freshly reattached, she couldn't help but shiver, thinking that everything was going exactly according to Kella's crazy plan. But she was still terrified that he was actually gone for good. Just then, Kella's eyes snapped open, and with a super annoyed look, he asked who she was calling an idiot. Ren was completely stunned to see him awake. She really hadn't expected him to pull through this time. She realized his regeneration took a major hit from mana-infused weapons like Cella's dagger, but right now, that didn't even matter. What was important was that he was alive and their plan was still a go. Ren was so emotional she ran over and gave him a huge hug, telling him she seriously thought he was a goner. Kella was caught completely off guard, turning bright red, and having no idea why she was doing that. He awkwardly pushed her away and said that since he survived, they were moving forward with the plan. At that moment, he started to dissolve the contract between them, freeing her from her duties as a servant. Ren was totally shocked by this, since she was now free to live her life however she wanted. But even so, she decided to stick with him. She remembered when they were kids, how she promised that one day she would be his friend, not just a servant. That memory made Ren even more emotional, and despite her new freedom, she declared she wanted to stay by Kella's side, saying she'd go anywhere as long as he didn't leave her behind. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Tolkien's commander was in terrible shape, covered head to toe in cuts and burns. He watched the Demon King, standing there even with one arm missing, still fighting on like some unstoppable force of nature. For the commander, this was the real deal, a walking catastrophe that no human could ever contain, no matter how clever their plans. He just stood there silently, taking in the battlefield, and realized nearly all the enemies were already down. At the same time, it hit him that none of his own soldiers were around anymore, either. The battle had reached its breaking point, with both sides completely wiped out, and now everything rested on the few who were left standing. His thoughts drifted to his children, and he worried that they weren't going to make it in time. But he quickly pushed that thought away, realizing this had always been his fight to finish. He decided he would use every last bit of mana in his body to fight to the very end. Meanwhile, Kella was dashing towards what he thought was an exit, thinking he could finally escape the castle and be free. However, Ren suddenly threw up a magic shield to block an attack headed right for them, explaining that she could smell trouble because mages were hiding in the walls. And those mages were there because they already knew the Demon King's kids would try to make a run for it, so they'd set up an ambush to stop any escape attempt. Kella was completely floored that they knew about the secret passage and couldn't figure out how they possibly could have discovered it. But the mages made it clear they had no intention of letting any of the Demon King's family escape alive. So, they started firing spells in their direction. Ren jumped in front to block the attacks, saying she would hold them off alone while Kella escaped. But he shot back that there was no way she could handle it by herself, knowing she could only use basic defense magic and was basically useless with offensive spells. Even so, she kept fighting. It was then Kella understood that Ren was ready to sacrifice herself just to protect him. Kella, fed up with the situation, refused to run. He forcefully shoved Ren out of harm's way so she wouldn't get killed, telling her that if she really wanted to follow him, she had better not die in front of him, because that would only make him even more ticked off. The mages just laughed at his tough guy act, saying he was trapped now. They mocked him, saying a simple mid-level spell would be enough to finish him off since he was known for being the weakest person in the demon realm. But Kella thought to himself that his body had always been timid, that it had never unleashed its true powers or shown its real strength. So, he decided right then and there that it was time to prove everyone wrong. And just like that, he effortlessly blocked their magic with his own mana. Ren's jaw dropped at how much power he had, and even the mages from the Celestial Guild were totally stunned. Kella then zipped towards the first mage, brutally slammed his head into the ground, and then overwhelmed him with his mana, asking if they still thought he was weak. They had some bad info and were about to go confirm their sources in the great beyond. The mage couldn't even gasp for air before his head was completely obliterated by the magical blast, erasing him from existence. Ren just watched, completely stunned that Kella was taking down mages from the Celestial Guild using nothing but his own mana. All the while, the other mages were freaking out, yelling that it was impossible since all their intel said Kella had absolutely zero combat ability. Well, Kella was busy proving just how wrong all that intel was. So, the mages left standing figured they had to go all in with some high-class magic. They decided to cast the Spear of Light spell. Knowing it was a huge gamble that would use up all their mana at once if they failed, it was game over for both of them. Still, the two of them cast the spell together. Ren, who was already running on fumes, knew she couldn't possibly block an attack that powerful. In the next instant, Kella was pierced by two spears of light, but Ren had managed to shield him from one by taking the hit herself, even though she was now impaled and couldn't move. She whispered an apology to her master, sorry that she couldn't protect him until the very end. The wizard just gloated that the plan was a success and that this was the end of the line for them. One of them even had the nerve to suggest that as a reward, they could have some fun with Ren, calling her a little beauty. But even with his spear sticking out of her, she told that creep to get lost because she knew all too well what humans did to demons they captured. The wizard just laughed it off, saying he'd get his fun with her soon enough. All Kella could think about was how, even in this world, people treated others like they were just things to be used. The mage then announced that before anything else, he was going to finish off the Demon King's kid. And Kella, who was fading fast, thought about how the castle exit was right there, so close, and that this was probably how he was going to check out. Just when all hope seemed lost, Ren screamed his name. And in that moment, Kella felt a bizarre sensation, like an immense force was zeroing in on him. Then, an image of his father, the Demon King Hellcin, appeared right before his eyes. Totally confused, he wondered if the fight was over and if his dad's master plan had failed. But then he heard his father's voice, explaining that he had already fought this battle countless times in his mind, weighing every single possibility and seeing all possible futures, all to get to this exact moment. Kella had no clue what he was talking about. So, Hell laid it out for him. Caldera had no compassion for her fellow demons, so she could never be queen. And Tarm had zero ambition to be king. So, even if it was only for a little while, he was certain that his son, Kella, was the absolute best choice to carry on the family legacy. Kella tried to argue, thinking this was a massive mistake, but it was too late. As his final act, Hell transferred every last bit of mana he had into Kella, revealing a secret ability. Turns out, the Demon King could pass down his power to his own bloodline right before he passed away. Kella was in total shock, asking his dad what on earth he was doing. But Hell simply thought that his son shouldn't mourn for him. Instead, he needed to act like a true demon and take on the world without a second thought. Back on the battlefield, all that was left of the once mighty Demon King was his head, lying among the ruins, marking the end of an era. General Killman had already given his life in the battle, leaving only Commander Seals and a handful of human soldiers. When they finally saw that the Demon King was dead, the humans erupted in celebration, thinking victory was finally theirs. However, at that very moment, Kella's body was hit with the full force of the mana he inherited from his father. The power surge was so violent that the spears of light piercing through his and Ren's bodies started to crack and shatter into pieces. She asked what was happening, while the mages looked on in total horror, unable to figure out how his power level had just skyrocketed out of nowhere. Kella could only wonder if his father was really gone, but he quickly understood that his dad's plan had worked perfectly right up to the very end. The mages, completely out of mana, realized they were in big trouble and started thinking about bailing. But Kella just told Ren to get clear. He could feel it now, the pure darkness that had belonged to his father, a power so intense it felt like it could devour everything around him. The mages screamed at him to stay back, calling him a demon, and that word instantly reminded Kella of the vile things they'd said to Ren just moments before. Completely enraged, he shot forward and threw a single punch, so incredibly powerful that it vaporized both mages at the same time, crushing them in an instant, and it dawned on him that the humans were the ones who looked like the real demons. Ren was completely floored by the scene, finally understanding the true power of the Demon King. But Kella could feel that his body couldn't handle that much energy for long. He asked Ren if she was able to walk, and even though she was hurt, she said yes, calling him her young master. At that, Kella announced it was time for them to get out of there. He figured that thanks to his father's sacrifice, he'd finally managed to escape that awful castle. Then, Kella found himself standing in the middle of a beautiful, green field. For a split second, he actually believed he was free. He dreamed that now he could go anywhere he wanted, live however he wished, and finally build a life of his own. But suddenly, a strange magic began to swirl around his body. Ren instantly recognized it as a teleportation spell, and Kella, without missing a beat, told her to grab his hands so they could stick together. In the next moment, they were both teleported away. They came crashing down like a comet into a far-off realm, a gorgeous and totally different place from where they had been. Kella was wondering where in the world they had ended up, while Ren, amazed by the view, remarked that she never knew he could cast teleportation spells. But Kella quickly explained that it wasn't his doing. It felt more like an emergency escape spell, something that had been set up ahead of time, most likely by his father, as an automatic safety measure to protect his kids in case he died. It was only then that Ren noticed her own wounds were completely healed. She guessed that about 3 days must have passed while they were unconscious, concluding it was a spell that combined teleportation with healing to save their lives. Ren realized with a thoughtful expression that their father had actually done it because he was worried. He really did care about his own children. Ren then asked if the Demon King was really gone, and Kella confirmed he was. He thought to himself that everything had gone exactly according to his father's plan. Ren then declared that he should become the next Demon King, but Kella was just confused, asking why on earth he would do that. Ren went on to explain that she'd noticed a change in him, something that made him the ideal successor. So from that point on, she would serve him faithfully until he claimed his title. Kella just thought she had the wrong idea, especially since he didn't have any powers right now. But suddenly, Ren let out a gasp. She had just realized they were in the magical country of Arsol, a land famous for gathering the most talented humans trained to hunt and eliminate demons. They spotted a massive banner celebrating the death of the Demon King, put up by the people of Talua. Kella couldn't help but wonder why, out of all possible places, they were sent here. He knew they'd be in serious danger if anyone found them out. But then Ren remembered she could use a transformation spell to make them both look human. Kella agreed it was a great idea, since she was clearly the expert with that kind of magic. He then asked Ren to fill him in on everything she knew about their new location. Ren explained that Arsol was a small island nation located to the east of Tulua. It's a land blessed by a legendary creature, the giant cryptid called Watergore, who lives in the nearby seas and has made the country's magical growth incredibly strong. As a result, the most powerful mages on the entire continent are born there, and for centuries, they have been the natural enemies of all demons. However, despite all that strength, Arsol was still under the political control of Tulua. Kella was baffled as to why his father would send him to such a dangerous place, but Ren reminded him that they were in the capital and needed to find a way out as soon as possible. Kella replied that a proper escape takes preparation, as she well knew. He figured that to achieve his dream in this world, he'd have to master magic, because in this country, everything ran on it. From the simplest buildings to the most advanced structures, every last thing was powered by spells. Even Talua's society depended on magic to function. Kella started to believe that this place, as risky as it was, could also be where he'd learn everything he needed to change his own destiny. Kella even thought that by being here, he might be able to create new dungeons, just like in the game. But suddenly, his grand plans were interrupted by an incredibly loud growl from Ren's stomach. She sheepishly said that maybe they should grab a bite to eat. A little while later, Ren was happily chowing down on a magical meal famous in Arsol, telling him over and over again just how delicious it was. Ren was so thrilled she ordered a second helping, declaring it was even more delicious than the first. Kella couldn't help but think that for someone who was just complaining, Ren was now having a little too much fun. She then suggested they hit up a nearby bar, and he was totally on board. When they got there, they walked right into a massive party. It turned out everyone was celebrating the defeat of the Demon King. The whole bash was led by Shreels, the commander of Talcon's army, and pretty much everyone was already wasted. Naturally, Ren and Kella were right in the middle of it, faking their best party faces to blend in. They started drinking along with the crowd, doing their best to fly under the radar. Kella was actually thinking a little break like this wasn't half bad. Unfortunately, Shreels had already spotted them and seemed to find the pair quite intriguing. A little while later, Kella was paying the price, hunched over in an alley while Ren laughed, telling him he clearly got a bit too carried away. Ren teased that he obviously couldn't handle his liquor, and how ironic it was they were celebrating his own father's demise. Kella shot back that she was the one who started downing drinks first, but just then, the party atmosphere vanished. People suddenly started rushing through the streets, yelling that a brand new S-rank mission had just been posted. This was a huge deal. Everyone was floored because up until now, the Demon King was the one and only S-rank mission that had ever existed. For another one to pop up out of nowhere was just unheard of. Ren grabbed Kella, insisting they had to go see what was going on. They pushed through a crowd gathered around the new poster, and both of their jaws dropped when they saw Kella's face staring back at them as the new target. He was officially named as the Demon King's son, the last target that had to be eliminated for good. Kella was about to blurt out, "Why me?" But Ren slapped a hand over his mouth just in time. She quickly played it off, telling everyone he was just a little too drunk. Some of the onlookers were already scoffing, saying he was the weakest of the Demon King's kids and that this mission felt more like a B rank, not S rank. They figured taking him down would be a piece of cake. Kella realized that laying low here was about to get a whole lot harder. As he and Ren quickly walked away, she almost let his real name slip out. Ren quickly asked what she was supposed to call him in public now. Kella had to think fast and came up with the name Shuo. Ren immediately said it was a terrible name and demanded to know where he pulled it from, but Kella just told her to zip it and deal with it. Ren then muttered she was surprised they found out he was still alive so fast. Kella agreed, saying their new plan was simple: grab what they came for and get out of the country as soon as possible. But as they tried to slip away unnoticed, they saw a woman watching them from the middle of the road. It was Shreels, and she stepped right in their path, asking if the rumors about a new S-rank mission were true. Kella just nodded nervously, while Ren quickly chimed in that they were just checking out the poster because they were curious. Kella recalled hearing people in the bar call Shreels the hope of our soul, which meant she had to be seriously powerful. Shreels then asked if the Demon King's son was actually alive, grumbling that demons never seem to stay down for good. Kella had a strong feeling she was talking about him, but he did his best to keep a straight face. Ren tried to play it cool, remarking that this son probably wasn't even that tough and taking him out shouldn't be a big deal. But then, all of a sudden, Shreels slung her arms around both of their shoulders, getting uncomfortably close. She asked if they really thought capturing this target would be a problem, even for the son of the Demon King. Shreels revealed that she'd had her eye on them for a while, adding that they had a really weird smell. Then she got right to the point, asking if there was more to them than meets the eye. In that instant, Kella and Ren both went completely stiff, sure that their cover was blown, but then Shreels just burst out laughing. She said they were probably just a couple of travelers who hadn't bathed in days. She even asked why they were so smelly, and the two of them, still totally on edge, just awkwardly agreed that yeah, that was it exactly. They just really needed a shower. Kella figured they were in the clear, at least for now. A little later, he was kicking back in a hot tub at a fancy inn, a tray loaded with sweets right by his side. While munching away, he wondered if this food was magical, too. He mused that he'd always dreamed of living inside a game world, and now, it looked like his dream had actually come true. He had to admit, this little moment of peace wasn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, Ren was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. She knew if her identity was revealed, it would be game over right then and there. And why was she so terrified? Because she was sharing a bath with Shreels herself. The commander asked how she was enjoying the bath, and Ren let out a nervous laugh, saying, "Oh, it's great, of course." Shreels picked up on her tension, remarking that she looked like a demon on the verge of being captured. Ren, trying to play it cool, just replied sarcastically, "Yeah, can you imagine?" Thinking Ren just needed to loosen up, Shreels cast a holy spell to help her relax. Internally, Ren was freaking out, because holy magic was pretty much the worst thing you could use on a demon. That kind of magic could completely shatter her transformation spell. While struggling to keep her disguise up, she desperately prayed her master would come and save her. But Kella, he was on the other side of the wall, chilling in another hot tub and sipping tea without a care in the world. Shreels let out a relaxed sigh, telling Ren that after the Demon King's defeat, she felt like her whole life's work had finally paid off. Meanwhile, Ren was just screaming internally for her to please shut up so she could get out of there. As Shriels started rambling on about being chosen as a mage at birth, Ren saw her chance to make a break for it. She cut her off, claiming she really had to use the restroom and would be right back. But before Shriels let her go, Shriels slyly commented that Ren probably wasn't a big fan of the sacred aroma. A little later, Ren finally found Kella and just unloaded on him about how awful that was. Kella, however, just mentioned how much more relaxed he felt after his bath. Ren shot back that this was hardly the time to be enjoying a nice soak when her disguise was almost completely blown. Kella looked surprised, asking what she meant. Ren had to spell it out for him. Shriels used a sacred scent that could literally drain a demon's mana. It was an advanced human magic that could have exposed her true form in a second. Kella admitted that, yeah, that could have been bad. But then he said he was just gonna hop in for another quick shower before they took off. An exasperated Ren insisted they had to leave right now. And of course, right on cue, Shriels showed up asking if they were already leaving. Ren, forcing a smile to keep up the act, said she'd love another dip in the bath with her, but regretfully, it was really time for them to go. Shriels insisted they couldn't possibly leave yet, saying they absolutely had to try the kingdom's magical food and drinks first. She cheered, practically dragging Kella along with her, while Ren's patience was wearing dangerously thin. Elsewhere, a squad of magicians was assembling. Their instruments had detected a demonic presence inside the house, and not just any demon, but the son of the Demon King himself. They declared this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that they had to capture the fiend immediately. As the mages prepared to launch their attack, Kella, Ren, and Shriels were trying out some seriously enchanted food. When Shriels casually mentioned that their drinks were made with sacred water, they all agreed it tasted amazing, with Kella adding that it was out of this world good. But as he kept sipping, he started to feel like his insides were on fire. He'd gotten so caught up in the delicious magic food that he totally forgot it might come with some wild side effects. It turns out the holy water was having a major disagreement with his demonic nature. That's when Shriels decided to pick up the conversation they'd started back in the bathtub. She explained that her entire life had been laser-focused on one thing, taking down the Demon King. She said she joined the talking squad and trained like a maniac for years on end. She even told them she got a gnarly scar during one of the intense tryouts just to get into the unit. Ren, completely surprised, admitted she hadn't even seen the scar, to which Shriels replied, "Oh, you think that's bad? I've got a worse one on my face." She then coolly pushed her hair back, revealing a huge scar over her right eye, and adding that the eye itself was long gone. Naturally, everyone's jaws just about hit the floor. Shriels explained that she uses a bit of magic to cover up the scars because every time she sees them, it's a harsh reminder. It brings back all the pain from the ridiculously tough days she had to push through. She went on to say that to get into the talking squad, you couldn't just be good. Applicants had to prove they were the absolute best of the best. It was the only shot anyone had at actually defeating the Demon King. They had to suck up the pain and push way past their limits. They had to show everyone that this was the one goal they wanted more than anything. Shriels then declared that she had dedicated her whole life to the singular mission of killing the Demon King. She then stared down the other two and asked what exactly they'd been up to this whole time. She got right in Kella's face and pointed out that he looked like he had some battle scars, too. But when she lifted his shirt to check, there was nothing there. She was stunned, saying his skin was so ridiculously smooth he looked like he'd never even seen a fight, let alone gotten a scratch. Ren started to freak out a little inside, knowing that such a gentle and close touch could totally shatter the disguise spell that was hiding Kella's real form. Then Shriels, with a much more intense look, flat out asked him if he was a demon. In that instant, Ren couldn't help but wonder if she'd known the truth all along. Before they could even react, a bunch of rats scurried out around them and, in a flash, transformed into wizards. Even Shriels looked completely surprised by this. Both Kella and Ren immediately knew they'd walked right into a trap and were wondering how they got found out. But Shriels, with a smirk on her face, mentioned that the mage's visit was a genuine surprise. The mages then confirmed the guild's intel was correct, revealing that Shriels was the one who had been in disguise this whole time. She was actually a traitor who had infiltrated their ranks. There was no way Kella or Ren could have ever seen this coming. Kella started to piece it together, thinking that the mages weren't after him at all, but Shriels. And his hunch was confirmed when she admitted, "Yep, you got it," and said there was no point in hiding anymore. In fact, she was the one who had leaked her own identity. The mages, now having all the confirmation they needed, announced they had her confession and were moving in to eliminate her. But Shriels didn't even flinch. She declared that she was an elite mage from the Tulkun squad and that a small group of Errol's mages stood no chance against her. Meanwhile, Ren was urgently telling Kella that they needed to bolt out of there, like, right now. And Kella was just thinking about how this situation had snowballed into something way bigger than they ever imagined. Just then, a massive magical explosion rocked the entire area, Ren could hardly believe the sheer power Shrills possessed, as she had wiped out everything with just one spell. Kella wondered if maybe she had protected them on purpose. He got his answer pretty quickly, when Shrills revealed that she had always known they were demons. There was no fooling her, she said, because she was a demon, too. With a determined look, Shrills introduced herself as Shrills Hellcin, daughter of the Demon King Hellcin himself. Kella and Ren were absolutely floored, completely unable to believe what they were hearing. But Shrills said there wasn't time for a long-winded explanation, so she decided to just show them the truth with memory transfer magic. She explained that she was born as part of an experiment. After tons of failures, she was the very first successful one, a demon who could hide her horns with her own demonic power. Kella was just in awe, realizing he was standing right in front of the Demon King's own daughter. And in her memory, the king himself declared that his own blood flowed through her veins, confirming Shrills as his heir. Shrills reflected on everything she had been through since she was born. For her, every single day had been a living nightmare. She endured agonizing experiments, watched so many others perish, and always thought she'd end up just like them. But she managed to survive, and now she finally understood it was all for a reason. She was the daughter of the Demon King. She proudly declared it was an honor to serve her lord, and the king replied that he would grant her a name worthy of her. He named her Shrills Kaldun and announced that she would become a spy, infiltrating the human kingdom to bring information directly back to him. Shrills thought that, as the Demon King's daughter, she could accomplish anything. Soon after, she snuck into the human kingdom, pretending she'd been captured by demons. Everyone felt sorry for her and warmly welcomed her into Arl, and that's how her life as a spy for the Demon King began. As time went on, she mastered Arsel's magic and grew into an incredibly powerful mage. She pushed through every hardship, overcame every single challenge, and eventually worked her way up to become the top member of the Tulkun Squadron, Arsel's elite force. After 15 long years, she finally had the chance to see her father again. All she wanted was to run to him and hug him, but she knew the time wasn't right just yet. She felt the perfect moment was just around the corner. Her mission was to secretly use her magic to help her father take out Killman, clear the battlefield of all their enemies, and once the coast was clear, she would return to the castle with him. Shrills' dream was simply to live by her father's side as her true self, Shrills Hellcin. However, things didn't go at all like they'd planned. Killman declared that the Demon King was even more incredible than he'd imagined, calling him the strongest opponent he'd ever had the honor to face. But the king just scoffed, saying he didn't need any compliments from a pathetic human like him. Furious, Killman yelled that the king's arrogance would be his downfall, and then, he unleashed his ultimate attack. It was the Spear of Heaven versus the Demon King's final gambit, the Flames of Hell. The magical clash was so huge, Shrills could barely even process what was happening. Then, right in the middle of that massive explosion, Shrills heard her father's voice in her head, speaking directly to her demon self, Dune. He told her she was in charge now, and that her new mission was to guide the next Demon King, protecting him to the very end, just as she had always protected him. And just like that, the battle was over, and the Demon King was gone. A completely shaken Shrills had to watch her own father die, totally helpless. After that whole ordeal, she had to go back to Tulua and put on a brave face, pretending to mourn with everybody for the man who was secretly her dad. After that awkward ceremony, she quit her position and went back to Arsol, which was basically her second home, the place where this whole adventure started. She tried to settle back in, but she really only had one goal in mind, to one day get payback for her father's death. She announced that her grand plan was to take down Arsol first. Ren, still trying to wrap his head around everything, asked, "Wait, so your times really times the Demon King's daughter?" Kella, on the other hand, felt like this was all a total nightmare. He figured he was finally done with siblings, even if they weren't blood-related. He never in a million years imagined a new sister would just pop up out of the blue. Shrills made it super clear that she wasn't going to force them to join her demon squad, but she needed them to understand one little thing. Arsol was basically the most magically supercharged country in the world. The longer they stayed, the slimmer the chances were for the demon race. She pointed out that Kella would be a goner if he stuck around there too long. Kella had to admit she had a point. I mean, even in video games, mages are always the heaviest hitters in any army. And at that moment, the person with the biggest target on his back in all of Arsol was him. Just outside, the mages were saying they totally heard that explosion. They declared that the trio wouldn't get away with it, and that they'd pour every last drop of mana they had into taking them out. Kella was ticked off, thinking that these mages still saw him as just a regular human, yet they were ready to attack him without a second thought. That's when he started to change back into his full demon form. Ren was absolutely stunned, but Kella just said it was for self-defense. Shrills, however, was even more floored to feel the energy pouring off of him. It was the exact same energy as their father, the Demon King. And so, that very night, what looked to Ren like an endless battle was about to begin. But in reality, it was more like a one-sided beatdown, because that's exactly what it was. For Shrills, using Arcel as their playground was like fighting with a home field advantage. She knew her way around just by feeling the ground with her hand. Unfortunately for the humans, they had to watch as all their important buildings got wrecked, including the government offices and the Magic Academy. Kella himself used the Demon King's mana to easily overpower the humans, who were all a bit out of it and vulnerable from the festival. With this kind of teamwork, the magical land of Arcel was completely wiped off the map, with absolutely nothing and no one left standing. When it was all over, even the sky itself seemed to be on fire. One of the mages even managed to shout that Arcel would never fall so easily and that he'd never forgive those darn demons. But then, he too got toasted by Shrills. She said that was her line, actually, because she was the one who couldn't forgive the humans, and she was starting with Arcel. Next, she toppled Taliesin, and finally, she would bring down the entire Talon Empire, wiping every last one of them out. Ren thought that sounded totally impossible, and Kella replied that they had helped each other out enough for one night, and now, it was time for them to part ways. But Shrills told him to hold on. She looked him in the eye and asked if he really thought she wouldn't recognize that power. You said you were called Dune, the Demon King's second son, didn't you? Kella figured the cat was out of the bag, so he just gave a nod to confirm that, yep, it was him. Shrills was shocked, asking if it was for real, since she was just taking a wild guess. And he actually confirmed it. She'd only had a hunch, but now she knew for sure. She then explained that, technically speaking, she wasn't the Demon King's daughter, but more of a special being created from his blood aura. Because of that, she could recognize anyone with the same blood. And since she was created after Kella was born, that technically made him her older brother. She then said she figured he probably wanted revenge for their father too, so they should totally stick together, not split up. Kella thought to himself that while revenge was definitely on his to-do list, his biggest desire was just to get away from all this. Shrills wondered if he was seriously planning to bail, considering he was the last direct heir of the Demon King, his only remaining kid. Ren figured it was probably smarter to just go along with her, because if they didn't, she might actually decide to end them. Kella quickly chimed in that of course he wanted revenge, realizing he was pretty much stuck agreeing with her for now. Hearing this, Shrills got super excited and suggested they could all hit the road together, leaving a trail of fire and destruction wherever they went. Kella thought to himself that he needed to learn Arcel's magic one way or another, and at the moment, the only person around who could teach him was Shrills. So, Kella decided he'd stick by Shrills' side for a little while, using revenge as his cover story. And in the meantime, he'd just have to treat her like a teammate. As they walked off, a human mage who had somehow survived the battle watched them leave, thinking he absolutely had to report this mess to the kingdom of Tulua. A little while later in Tulua, an emergency message was rushed directly to the king, interrupting his fancy banquet. The king demanded to know what was so important. The messenger explained that Shrills from the Tan Squadron was secretly a demon and that Arcel had tried to take her out. But then, the messenger added, Kalakan, the Demon King's last son, showed up out of nowhere and helped her completely obliterate Arcel. The king was totally shocked and sputtered, wait, the Demon King's son took out Arcel? The messenger confirmed it, saying he was most likely working with Shrills. At that, the king became absolutely furious, declaring that this was completely unacceptable. He raged that not only Shrills but also the Demon King's son were making a total mockery of their kingdom. He ordered both of them to be hunted down immediately and wanted posters with big rewards to be plastered everywhere. Whoever managed to take out Shrills would get her spot in the Talcon squad. The messenger, whose name was Haydn, swore on his life that the two of them would be brought down. He then walked over to the Demon King's head, which was on display like a morbid museum piece. He thought to himself that the king's cursed family line was somehow still kicking. He vowed right then and there to burn every single one of the Demon King's descendants to a crisp. A bit later, the king's advisor called Haydn over and told him that General Killian should have received the message by now. He then ordered him to head back as quickly as possible. Haydn thought about Killian, knowing he was the greatest knight in the entire kingdom, even more skilled than the legendary Killman. To catch Kella and Shrills, Killian was their man. Meanwhile, Killman's own brother had just been told that Killman had died sacrificing himself to defeat the Demon King. Killman's brother asked if the Demon King was truly dead. And if he is, he continued, why do you still need my help? The messenger explained that they needed him for a new mission, to hunt down Kellan, the Demon King's very last son. Killman shot back that he couldn't care less what anyone else wanted. The only thing that mattered to him was that demons had taken his brother's life. Elsewhere, Kella was totally stunned by the sight before him. He just couldn't believe he was expected to eat that weird-looking food. Shrills chimed in, saying he didn't have to eat if he was full, since it wasn't nearly enough